William James spent the last decade of his life working toward a complete philosophy of reality, a metaphysics that would do for the universe what pragmatism had done for truth and radical empiricism had done for experience. The result, presented as lectures at Oxford in 1908 and published as A Pluralistic Universe, is his most ambitious and, in many ways, his most personal work. It is also the work he never quite finished. He died in 1910, still revising, still adding, still convinced that the most important ideas were just out of reach. The book's central argument is a sustained attack on what James called vicious intellectualism, the tendency of rationalist philosophy to take the clean, static concepts it constructs and treat them as more real than the flowing, messy experience from which they were abstracted. The great rationalist systems of philosophy, from Plato through Hegel, had in common a commitment to what James called monism, the view that reality, properly understood, is one substance, one mind, one process, one absolute. The apparent multiplicity of the world we experience is, in these systems, either an illusion to be overcome or a partial view of a deeper unity. James thought this was deeply and dangerously wrong. Not because unity was an unattractive idea, he found it attractive himself, but because the move to unity required destroying everything that made experience real. To unify the universe into a single absolute, the Hegelians had to argue that time, change, struggle, and tragedy were somehow appearances within a totality that was ultimately perfect and complete. James found this morally intolerable. It seemed to make evil merely apparent, suffering merely relative, and individual effort merely a scene in a play whose outcome was already written. The absolute, complete, self-contained, victorious, left no room for the genuine uncertainty that James felt in his bones was real. His alternative was pluralism, the view that reality consists of many things, related to each other but not subsumed into a single overarching unity. The universe is, to use one of his favorite phrases, a multiverse rather than a universe. It is unfinished, genuinely open at the edges, genuinely capable of going differently than it does, genuinely dependent on the choices and efforts of conscious beings for its ultimate character. This is not a comfortable view. It means that nothing guarantees things will work out, that evil is real rather than apparent, that the stakes of moral effort are genuine. But for James, this was a feature rather than a bug. Only in such a universe does courage mean anything. James connected his pluralism to his radical empiricism, the philosophical program he had been developing since the 1890s. Radical empiricism begins with the insistence that experience is the fundamental datum of philosophy, and that experience includes not only the contents of consciousness but the relations between those contents. The relations are just as real as the things they relate. When you perceive one thing as causing another, that causal relation is part of your experience. It is not a logical inference or a conceptual addition. This meant that the stream of consciousness, with its continuous flow and felt connections, was not a veil over reality but reality itself as encountered by a finite mind. The practical implications of pluralism were significant to James. In ethics, it meant that what we do genuinely matters, that a universe without good efforts in it is actually better, not merely apparently better, than a universe without them. In religion, it opened space for what James called a finite God, a divine presence that was genuinely good and genuinely limited, struggling alongside conscious creatures rather than presiding over them from a position of omnipotent invulnerability. Many of James's contemporaries found this diminished vision of God unsatisfying. James found the omnipotent God of traditional theology the more troubling option. A Pluralistic Universe is not an easy book, and James knew it. He wrote it for an audience of professional philosophers while trying to remain accessible to intelligent general readers, a balance he did not quite achieve. But the vision it articulates, of a world that is genuinely open, genuinely multiple, genuinely responsive to conscious effort, is one of the most inspiring and most honest in the history of philosophy. It is a vision that James earned through suffering, through sustained intellectual labor, and through the kind of personal courage he had written about all his life. Subscribe to The Psychology of William James to explore more of his timeless ideas.